It's preparing it now. So give it a minute and then we'll be off. Right. I think we are live now. So give me a second and I'm going to, yes, perfect. So, guys, a very warm welcome to my Coffee with Manny live session. And today I have none other than Alex Schlagerman, who is the CEO and founder of SaveTheHighStreet.org, as well as Join Joe. Is Join Joe an org as well, Alex?
Join Joe is joinjoe.com and Save the High Street is savethehighstreet.org.
Fantastic. So just wanted to make sure I've got it right. So very lucky indeed to have Alex here. And the purpose of this live stream session is to engage with Alex in regards to how we as property developers and investors can get involved in, reviving the high street. So let me set the scene here for a bit. And, some of you may know already that the UK high street is going through a seismic shift, for want of a better word. And it has been, slowly, sort of regressing, as it were, over the years. But obviously with COVID, that's really hit the nail in the coffin. And retail, as we know, has suffered a massive setback in the last few weeks with the likes of Debenhams, Arcadia Group, and all the other ones that we all know of going possibly under receivership. Office, as we know, is a complete reset as well. Everyone, as we know right now, is working from home. But there's a lot of money, a lot of properties at stake here, and high street is where we rely on as it's part of the whole dynamic property market here. So, how do we prevent the high street from failing, from dying, and how do we revive it? So, I give you a bit of a gist, and I'd like to bring in Alex here. Firstly, a big warm welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me back, Manny.
Thank you. And so what's your view on where the high street is going right now?
Okay, so I'll paint this in with a few dimensions. So firstly, there's a lot of gaps, as you've touched on, that are going to get left by the likes of Arcadias and Debenhams, going into administration or even liquidation in some cases here. But actually, there's a whole raft of CVAs that are planned for Q1. Now, some of those CVAs may not happen. They're being used partly as a negotiation position to renegotiate lease agreements. But, in almost all cases, the large national retail and restaurant chains who are preparing these CVAs are willing to press that nuclear button. Yeah. And as a result, we're going to see a lot of new gaps emerging on the high streets that either need to be filled with new operators or repurposed into other uses. And what we need to do from an operator point of view there is make sure that those gaps are filled where there is suitability for Class E, for a high street type use, with the right kind of business for that catchment area that gives it the best chance of meeting the needs of that local community and giving them a chance of succeeding and reducing their chance of failure. Those businesses also need to make sure they've got the support they need from day one to make sure they reduce their risk of failure and increase their chance of success. Kind of obvious stuff, really. Now, so that's one side of things. So the other side is that actually every single high street needs a plan. And it sounds obvious, but a really data-driven, evolving, dynamic plan that reflects the needs of that local community now, but also has the dynamism to change over time. And use class is a really important part of this. So we need to have the right mix of uses in every single high street. And the reality is we're savethehighstreet.org, but actually the reality when we get into the data is some of our high streets in the UK are too big. There's actually an oversupply in a lot of cases of high street uses. And as a result, particularly with all the changes you identified at the beginning going on, in some town centres, we're going to need some flexible office space because people aren't going to go into the city centres to work anymore. In a lot of places, we've got, not enough residential, and there's more demand for residential in those town centres. And the more people that are there, the more money they're going to spend locally in those high streets as well. And in a lot of cases, some of the other things we could talk to is, we're going to need better kind of last mile logistics and fulfillment and warehousing infrastructure inside the town centres to fulfill these needs as well. So what we really need to have at the core of this is a very clear data-driven business case around what every high street needs in terms of uses. And it's one of the things that we'll talk a little bit more about work we're doing around this. The other side of things that I'll just give you, just paint some of the other picture if you're talking about where the high street needs to go, we need to make sure that collaboration is really the norm, not the exception. And collaboration on various levels. We've been sort of well known because we've been putting local champions in place, local community groups and trades association and bids, sometimes individuals, people who've got a vested interest in that high street working and empowering them to be leaders in their own high street. But actually, it's much broader than that. And public-private sector partnerships is going to play a really, really important role over the coming years, with local authorities actively supporting this change, like in some cases, particularly with the property sector, like never before, because the reality is, we all have to work together to get through what has been this incredibly challenging year for local economies generally. And actually, we're all directly tied together, whether you're a local authority, whether you're a property developer, whether you're a landlord, whether you're a tenant, everybody relies on each other. So there's going to be a lot more partnerships going on. Final point I'll mention here is that as we move through this period, it's going to be a period of huge opportunity. And in every change period, there's a period of huge opportunity, but there's going to be, billions of pounds worth of assets which are traded over the coming years. And those assets that are traded in a lot of cases are coming from a very, very low base in a world where, landlords had less flexibility to do things with their asset. There was less support historically for making that asset work. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the moment didn't exist a year or two years ago. So actually, there's a huge opportunity for a new generation of not just high street businesses, but investors and developers to come into these town centres and sort of realize one of the great sort of wealth generation opportunities of our time, which is quite ironic because it's been such a challenged asset class over the previous years.
So that is a lot. So thank you for saying there's a lot that you've mentioned there, and I'm trying to get my head around it. Now, a few things I'm going to pick on, mainly from a property angle. I'd say how you mentioned there's obviously £1 billion of assets going to be exchanging hands.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, some of these businesses are going to have to go into receivership, go into liquidation for obvious reasons. And, the fact that they haven't been able to sustain business, even though the government, on another topic, actually, do you think the government has helped enough, has helped those SME businesses enough or helped them, survive and sustain this throughout this period? What's your views generally on that?
So look, I mean, a couple of times been encouraged by this year, and we're always pushing for more. So there's a bit of temper there, but the reality is there's more coming. This is not the end of the support, but what's happened over the last year is unprecedented amounts of public sector support for this market, and you can't get your head around it in some ways. The amount that's happened, but more will be required, and so some of the sort of targeted interventions we're expecting to see is support for new businesses setting up, because the reality is the death rate, as you pointed out, is high. Some of the big guys, particularly, they're going to reduce their store footprints. What we need to do is incentivize a new generation of startups to come to the high street and be successful. And a part of that is not just around actually the government sector support, but actually this is about lenders as well. So one other point I'll just touch on here, which is going to be a big part of the future, is there's going to be a lot more risk and reward sharing in this market. And we've seen it, driven by, large tenants in shopping centres over recent years. It's not a brand new thing at all, but it's really seeping down quickly, which is what you'll hear turnover rents mentioned a lot, with rents linked to turnover. Now, the reality is we need to move beyond just turnover and start to think about what's the true value of this space. And actually, how do we share that value between tenant, landlord, and importantly, also in this tripartite relationship, the lender? Because actually, the landlord, in a lot of cases, is under pressure from the bank and the lender. And actually, the valuers have a role to play in really understanding this. So there's a number of different dimensions here. And one of the things that I'm expecting more from central government, something that I've been mentioning a lot, is actually to get that tripartite relationship really working now. Not to see this as a landlord-tenant thing, but see it as a landlord-tenant-lender thing.
Bank, absolutely. And I think you've touched a very, very important point because, up until now, commercial property is valued primarily on the rent that it achieves, right? Is that correct? If that rent is going to become flexible, how is that property going to be valued? That's a huge undertaking in itself, because as you said, without the support of the lenders, it's going to be pretty tough, actually, I think.
Yeah, you're quite right. So this is
While we
a
are
key thing we'll
moving,
see
before we
dynamics
move,
on.
absolutely. So we've got a few people who've joined us, actually, and one of them is Bushra. So Bushra, a very warm welcome to the chat, and thanks for joining us. One of our questions is, how do we find out about the town centre plans?
So there's different levels of town centre plans. So there's something we're doing now. Yeah, so I'll talk to that firstly. So big focus of ours here is that every single high street needs a plan, as we said before. It needs to have the right mix of uses across it, and it's actually really driven from the bottom up. So every single unit actually has a plan in the high street, and it's that combination of units that makes up a town centre. So that's the first thing. So, from our point of view, a big focus of ours over the coming month is going to be rolling these out. What we've been doing locally, because we partner with a lot of local authorities, is we're starting to do this work on a location by location basis. And a big focus of our work over the coming months is to actually start to build a sort of nationwide localized plan for every single high street to see the comparisons and see the opportunities here. So we're going to be applying a lot of our resources into doing that, and then surfacing that information as tools and data and insight for existing owners and partners of ours. And what we want to be doing here is really bringing together all the existing owners of properties in town centres, providing free support, free tools for them, and guiding those owners towards what needs to happen next, whether that is around, helping double down and, increase the value of their existing tenant in terms of the amount of money they're making and their potential in that unit, or whether it's about finding a new tenant for that unit, or whether even it's about, finding a way to repurpose that unit, or even potentially dispose of that unit to somebody who has got a plan for that unit, which is a big part of what we've been talking about, Manny. And I'm really keen to have a good group of SME developers around us getting in touch with us so that we can kind of partner around these things this year.
See, that's what I was going to ask you. So you mentioned when it comes to disposing of assets, then obviously our things pop up because we're developers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Develop things. We want to add value to property. That's where we come in. That's our business model, right? So how do we then partner up with savethehighstreet.org or joinjoe.com? And is that something that you're offering property investors and developers?
Yeah, so we are going to be. So as a byproduct of what we've been doing anyway, we're inevitably, especially as we move into this year and some of the stuff we've just been talking about, going to be identifying a lot of, off-market, in a lot of cases, undervalued assets where the existing owner isn't in a position to do something with it. And we want to have people that are on the inside with us with a shared vision around where this is going, and are really sort of comfortable with sort of working together around stuff to take ownership of that asset and do the right thing for the town centre in terms of local economy, local community, but also in terms of capital appreciation, income, all the good stuff as well. So we're in a position where we're doing that. One of the things that we've been looking at here, because SaveTheHighStreet.org and Joe are part of a limited company. We trade as a limited company. Save the High Street is an industry movement that we developed this campaign, and we do all this work with public and with private sector to make high streets, deliver on this vision of the future high street. And Joe is this technology platform that's collecting a lot of data. It supports the existing businesses at the moment, but it's doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes as well, with interesting stuff with data. And so one way we've been developing this mechanism really, where we're going to open a funding round into our core business. And we're going to effectively build a syndicate of investors, and we're making it exclusive for people with interest, property sector experience and interest in this market, so that we can have a really good insider group that we're going to be working closely together with. And the implication of that is that the people who invest, it's going to be under a convertible loan, so they'll be able to get a certain interest payment until that loan converts into shares. And when it converts into shares, they'll actually own shares in the core business. And then in addition to that, because of the nature of this, we really want to be close to lots of good SME developers as well. We see value of having this good insider group. But on the flip side of it, we recognize that, with these opportunities that come through, we're looking to initially see from that group, if we've got a really good group around this, whether we can start to address these things together before we start to build out the next phase of it, which will be more of I don't know, we call it a marketplace, but to open up to other developers to address opportunities that landlords today aren't willing to address themselves. So
Right.
I think the first stage really for us, it sort of made sense that we were looking to raise around the government's future fund is match funding the whole thing. And we thought rather than just open it up to normal investors, anybody who wants to invest for a normal return, let's make it really strategic and invite a whole bunch of developers and landlords as well who have existing assets in this area who can see value even beyond the core of the investment, and we can see value in working with them. So I think that's a good start point.
Yeah. So how much, so if you don't mind me asking, how much interest are you giving them on their convertible loan? Is it like per annum?
Yeah, it's 8% per annum.
Okay. And that's going to be at the end of the year, presumably, or is it going to be
Yeah, so it's an annualized thing, and then exactly. And then
paid at the end of the, and you'd say the initial loan term would be what, 12 months or longer, or
3 years actually. I
3
mean, the
years?
intention is that we get the loan converted into shares before that, though.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Perfect.
we're planning a larger round. There's a lot to be done, as I was saying before. It's, from our point of view here, the realities is, we're an ESG business, which means we're all about, trying to make the world a better place, in terms of impact on environment, impact on, social impact and economic impact locally, but we've also, we are a private limited company. We've got shareholders here. We're driving a return. So there's a lot of businesses like us now in this world where we're sort of businesses for good. Now, but the reality is, from our point of view, the world changing so much, this market changing so much has really contextualized everything we're about as well. We want to safeguard a good future, but we also recognize that if we can raise the capital that we're planning to, which includes a much larger raise around this time next year or early in 2022, we are in a position to really address this opportunity commercially as well, more effectively. So, so we're out there thinking about the sort of bigger picture ourselves as well, about how do we raise the right amount of capital to make sure we can have A, the impact, but B, the commercial success we're hoping for.
And how much is the total raise you're looking for?
It's 1.5 million in total.
So 1.5 million, is that including the government matched money?
Yeah.
We had 750,000 from investors and developers, and then government will match that by stopping it up.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's all being set up at the moment. There's an escrow account.
How do people access this? If people want to get involved and know a little bit more about how to get invested, you guys, how do they find out?
Well, I mean, I think it's to reach out to me. I mean, I'm committing a lot of my time here over the next few weeks around this, both in terms of sort of the week going up to Christmas, and I'm going to be in conversations with people, a lot over the coming week. So, my email address is probably a good place to start.
I'll put it on the chat as well. Also,
put it on the chat.
Say it out as well.
Yeah, and even if there's other things as well. I mean, this is obviously an opportunity to get close.
What's your email address? Is it alex@savethehighstreet.org?
That's the one. alex@savethehighstreet.org.
Going to take some more questions, actually. We've got the lovely Akhil joined us as well. And I'm just going to put your address, email address. Hi, Akhil, and thanks for joining us. So Akhil's question is, Alex, what businesses you think should or will be required going forward for years to come, bearing in mind the exodus of major companies?
Yeah. So, I mean, one level of the answer is that every single catchment area has its own unique plan, and it goes back to that. And we actually need to have really quite clearly defined plans that meet the needs of the local community, but also sometimes destination goals as well. So you can have agglomerations of certain types of businesses in an area because actually this is where you go, such as Hatton Garden for jewellery. There's still a place for lots of jewellers in Hatton Garden. Doesn't mean that's wrong, because there's not as much demand for jewellery products in the catchment area around it. So that's one level of the answer. But the reality is as well, and I'm getting to the question that's being asked here as well, is that we're going through a major structural change in the way that we consume. And actually, a lot of the models of old are no longer as relevant. Now, the reality is, and we break the high street up into different categories in different ways, but certain types of high street offering need to evolve or die. And so what we call sort of comparison product retail, which is often the case, you can kind of find compare and buy the same thing online without any major value add in terms of service or experience, or in some cases you can get really hyper convenience going on around it. There needs to be a real evolution of that business model to being much more either added value services and experiential or hyper local convenience around those kind of things. Now, product retail is not dead at all by any stretch. Convenience has got a really important place. If it becomes hyper convenient in this world here, 1 hour delivery on everything from your news agents, and a clear view that you've actually got optimized stock in that news agent in the future that serve that local community's needs through the month, and optimized opening times, all kinds of things that every single type of business needs to do. But comparison product retail is a challenged area unless they become niche and focus on experience, or they become much more convenient in a lot of cases.
Comparison products, you mean the likes of clothing shops?
Can be clothing, but sometimes clothing can be quite experiential as well. So it depends. So a lot of clothing you can actually just see exactly the same thing somewhere else. So the challenge is something like House of Fraser really found is like, how do they really sort of manifest something really different? And we'll touch in a second on the big department stores, because there's actually a really big opportunity, and we're doing a lot of stuff in this space at the moment.
See, because that's a huge problem at the moment, isn't it? These department stores are not built in a way for anything else apart from being, because there's no windows generally. They're all sort of very long, so there's very less frontage from the street. So is there a plan as such in place for these big departmental stores that are not going to survive?
Yeah, there is. So I'll touch on that now.
Give me 1 second, Alex. I'm just going to check with Akhil. Akhil, hopefully that's answered your question. But by all means, I'd say reach out to Alex via his email address, alex@savethehighstreet.org, for any additional questions. And obviously, he's on our J6 community as well, and the Ealing Property Meet. So I'd say, we're lucky to have him on board. Sorry, just one more thing. I wanted to really just quickly touch on the opportunity you mentioned about the property developers joining in this fund that you are. Okay. So have you actually gone live with this fund?
So it's in sort of it's live on some levels here because people are making commitments, but it's not formal yet. So we haven't the escrow account hasn't gone live yet. It's happening this week. So we're not taking the money in, but I have people that have been close to this over the last few weeks that I promised that they can have a position on it. So I'm kind of in consultation with people at the moment. So it is sort of live, but I haven't set the escrow account. We haven't set the escrow account up yet.
And where, if you mentioned before, sorry, I missed that because I'm trying to juggle a few balls here. If they want to know more on that investment fund, where do they go?
Well, come to me firstly because I can share full information. I've got a simple summary version. I've got all the detail, and I'm available for conversations around the whole thing. It's a conversation. This isn't the kind of thing you just go and you click a button and buy into here. Right, I want to be in conversation with everybody. It's got to be right for everyone.
Yeah. So if you guys want to discuss minimum amounts, what is qualified,
yeah,
I think just email Alex. I think at the moment it's very much more of an informal basis. There's no sort of website where you can go in and just click a commitment. Can we commit to 10 pounds or something like that, right?
Yeah, and there's going to be some information published on our website online around this stuff here, but it's not there yet. And as I said, if you want to get involved and find out more, just drop me a line and I'll send you some information. And I'm open to having a chat.
Great. So we've got quite a few people actually join us and listening to us and engaging. And I think
okay.
This is so much to absorb. I'm just like, my head is spinning around thinking, you are a super busy man. So I do really appreciate you taking the time out to talk about all this. So I'm just trying to think now. So we've talked about the raise. We've talked about where the opportunity. So one question I had as well is, you talked about having a small group of property developers that you can reach out to for assets that you're going to look to dispose. Is that going to be people going to invest in your business or invest in this fund, or is it going to be people not just people, but it might be other people as well? How do we get involved with that side of things?
Well, look, stay close with us for starters, because it's an evolving thing. As I said, we've got this opportunity now, which is going to be about getting involved in the core business, and all the people who are involved in the core business are going to form what we're calling a High Street 3.0 roundtable. I know it's a bit of a tongue twister, but we talk about High Street 3.0 as our vision of the future. And there's a few people who are sort of close to this already, who are active shareholders, other people who are already clearly coming in, who have interest in the space, similar developers, investors, landlords. And so that group there are going to be consulting with us closely around this, so the opportunities and the connections and the insight that we're getting out here. And we'll be addressing some of those things together early in the early days. But, stay close to us anyway, even if you don't get involved in the core business.
I mean,
worth following SaveTheHighStreet.org. You're going to hear a lot more about what we're doing with the real estate market generally over the coming months. So, regardless of whether you're involved in this opportunity or not, you should stay close, I'd say.
So thank you for that. And also, I had another question around turnover rents. Now, has there been any examples now where we've seen, because obviously up until now, let's put it that way, landlords had an easy run, for want of a better word, right? They had 7-year leases, they had, rent reviews.
Upward only rent reviews,
Rent reviews, and if you didn't pay your rent, you were out, right? And so they've had it very cushy for very, very long. Because as far as I know, it's never changed. But now obviously is a time that it's going to have to change. How are you finding, are you in contact with some, and how are you generally finding their reaction? How do you see it? Because I see it as a big challenge because, generally commercial landlords are, tend to be the older ones because there is a lot more money you need to invest in commercial property, right? There's a lot more cash you need. So I think, how do you find them changing and how you're going to make them change their perspectives on this, and actually go for turnover rents? It's going to be.
Look, it's all about rational business case. There's no forcing anything. We're in a situation at the moment where we've been in lockdown situations where tenants haven't been able to trade, and in a moratorium period. And there's a big market that I'm sure a lot of people listening in are aware of agents that have been kind of working, typically representing tenants during this period, often on a no-win, no-fee basis. Supporting around the renegotiation of leases because, there's a strong leverage position at the moment and nobody wants an empty property. You've got an empty property after a few months, you've got a business rate liability on it in most places as well. So actually, even if you're not making any rental income, it's better to have somebody in there for a period, So, there's been a lot of leverage around this. So what's happened through COVID-19 is it's forced the hand of things to change more quickly in a lot of cases. And turnover rents is one really good example of this. There's been some quite high profile renegotiations of larger tenants that have moved to almost entirely turnover based. A lot of the time we see it more like top up, and it's actually having a base rate and top up rate as well. It's about finding the right mix for the right tenant. And ultimately, we're going to need to see a high street where it works for everybody to have more flexible lease structures, in some cases even license agreements, and in other cases agreements which are linked in some cases entirely to the turnover. And it needs to make sense for everybody. So our position here, because we're very data centered, and we always have been, come from a very strong foundation of data scientists in the core team from day one. We've been collecting a lot of high street data throughout this whole period. And from our point of view, one of the big things that we've been focused on addressing is firstly, what we've been doing this year is providing transparency to the landlord about what the turnover and performance of their tenants is. It has to be opt-in, but if the tenants want to come onto these kind of agreements, it's about partnership. If this is going to be a partnership where we're going to be sharing risk and rewards, we need to share information transparently. So we have a part of our platform as we connect in with the systems that a business has, and we collect sales data and other performance data, and we're supporting those tenants in being as successful as possible. We're like a team on their side, and helping them be successful. And us having that data is really useful. But actually,
and they need it right now, Alex. They very much need that support, I think. Don't you think?
No, a lot of our resources have been thrown at that this year. This is why we're coming out this period now and really looking at the next phase. We've spent a lot of our year working with local authorities to make sure their local businesses are as successful as possible. And now we're moving into this next phase here, which is not just about understanding where is a business today, but starting to understand where is it going? What is the potential? What is the forecast of a business? And I'm talking about really early stage businesses as well, which have historically been very difficult to forecast. So some of the success stories we're going to see on the high street tomorrow don't exist today. They're in the street food market at the moment, and they're flying with a great brand on Instagram, but you can't evaluate them in the same metrics. So what we're doing is we're building the tools to be able to do that, so that you can get in an operator that is historically looked high risk, but reduce the risk of that operator and start to see that working through the system. So, for us, it's not so much about forcing the hand. The market is happening this way anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reality is what we're doing is providing the insight for everybody to say, look, this is the right kind of operator in your space at the moment. This is what they need to be doing. This is what their potential is. And as a result, here's how you can all make as much money as possible. And ultimately, turnover rent doesn't mean less money. It can mean a lot more money as well, because you're taking
in some
risk.
cases, right?
Yeah.
So
we
what
want to
you're
reduce
doing
that
is
risk and reduce the uncertainty.
So let's give just a basic example.
Yeah.
In March 2021, you have one of the properties where the businesses have another 3 years left on their lease, for example.
Yeah.
Their businesses has been, down by say 50%. So would you then sit everyone down, like the landlord, the tenant, and yourself, and say, well, this is where we are at. This is the data that clearly shows that they're not going to be able to afford that rent. So do you want to leave, because you could kick them out after March and extended? Do you want to negotiate a turnover rent based on these figures, and this is what we think that's going to be, or is that what's going to happen?
Yeah. Well, increasingly we're sort of shifting away from where the focus was very bottom up, and it was very much we're working with the tenants and moving up there. So actually sort of engaging directly with the landlord as well, with the view about what their options are. Because sometimes this is a sensitive situation, a sensitive conversation to have, but the reality is, we are all about making high streets vibrant and successful. So, when we see a landlord with a tenant that can work, we're going to try and double down with them and get that tenant working as well as possible and make sure the economics work for everybody. But in some cases here, and you'll see it on high streets, when you see the plans that we're doing, sometimes they're just too big. There's actually just like too much. It's oversupplied in the size. Actually, it's sometimes it's less the core. Often the core is right, but often high streets are too long. And you go around a lot of the country here, and in those cases there, the best thing for the high street is to shrink it a little bit. And that's where it's become really interesting. And in those conversations there, again, it's about providing the landlord with the tools and the data and the support to do the right thing for their property. And in some cases, as I said, it will be about doubling down. In some cases, about changing direction.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. There's another question actually by Bushra. What are your thoughts on small village high streets?
Say that again.
What are your thoughts on small village high streets? Like the secondary parades and things like that. Yeah.
Well, look, a lot can work. It's not a one size fits all at all. And when we talk about our model here, we're all about supporting the transformation of high streets in town, city, village, market, and shopping centres. And we are working increasingly with shopping centres to look at the vacant unit challenge. It's a big part of what needs to be done here. So for me, it's not a one size fits all, but there are realities that when you start to look at the plan nationally, and this is one of the reasons why in my team here, like David, the COO at Group, and guys, they're very, very focused now about moving away from just being localized and doing a plan for a particular center where we've got a relationship with local authority of doing this, to having a national view. Because as soon as you do that, you start to realize that actually the context of this small center next to this big center doesn't make a lot of sense. You've got to kind of understand how they sit together. So it's often a very, very important part of the fabric of that local community to have that small village high street. But in some cases, actually, it stops serving a purpose when you've got an important center very nearby, which everybody's using, and nobody's using that village center anymore.
So it's all about specific locations and how people are. What are their patterns, shopping patterns, what are they doing? So that's very interesting. So there's 2 or 3 things I really want to talk about here before we finish. One is you talked about the departmented store. So you were saying you guys have plans for it. Is there plans?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one, because I think everybody listening into this will empathize as well that there's been a lot of challenge in the department store space, and a lot of the sort of the mass market department stores have either gone under or looking really dodgy, financially. So it's not working. That model's not working, and you touched on it as well. What we've found that's really interesting, and we're running a pilot in South London at the moment, and I urge anybody who's down in Peckham to maybe go check this out. It's called The Mall in Peckham at the moment. or maybe a rebrand there, is a sort of reimagining of that space. Now, this wasn't a huge space, but it was decent size. It was an old Pound World. And on the top floor is now flexible office space. And on the ground floor is like an indoor market. And that indoor market is basically cut up what was one big unit into lots of micro units now. And those micro units all have a local independent business or a startup in there on our platform from day one, with the support they need to be as successful as possible, carefully curated to meet the needs of this area. They're on flexible 3-month rolling license agreements, so they can be changed around. And there's an entrepreneur that's sitting in the middle at the moment, taking the head lease and arbitraging. Yeah. So there's an opportunity here, to make these spaces, into very different looking, if you like, call them department stores or malls, but they're not. They're, if anything, they're like an market. There's a bar at the back, and there's food operators in there. There's little retail congregations, and so we're seeing a number of these micro malls, we call them, starting to emerge. In the old BHS on Oxford Street in central London, Market Hall has developed a food focused version of this. And so what we're really interested in is say, well, we've got a really powerful sort of management platform and support. We want to see these things exist. So we're going to support more and more of these operators who are going to do it. But increasingly, I'm thinking, and I'm looking at a lot of these big units that are coming up, and probably looking at the same thing. These are big property assets that are going at next to nothing. Imagine if you could do something with this. Imagine a world where planning was a little bit more flexible.
Yeah.
And we've not touched explicitly on it, but clearly September was a big period for PD rights in sense of the Class E emerging and some more flexibility around permitted developments in town centres. But we're now in consultation around what happens from July onwards. And this is a really, really important period for developers and investors to be aware of and looking at these opportunities. And this is one of the reasons why we're accelerating a lot of our resources around this, to make sure we can safeguard town centres, as well as helping our partners, make sure they address the commercial opportunities that are available. And in that world, in that new world that we're in here, some of those big box department stores, they won't be department stores anymore. They're going to be mixed use schemes. Yeah. And I think the ground floors are increasingly going to look like what's going on in Peckham.
Yeah. Marketplaces. Yeah. First floor would be offices. And then the big question here is residential. How do we bring residential back in the market? And I'll address that in a minute, but we've got a question here, or a comment actually from Anna. So welcome, Anna. And her comment is, it's like rent to rent in commercial space. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, it is really. I mean, you take the head lease and you sublet it out to tenants there. I mean, it's an interesting one, Other people call it WeWorks for like high street units, and there's lots of analogies, but rent to rent is a good way of looking at it. And anybody who's really looking at that space there, we're really interested to talk to you, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people to sort of start to do that. In terms of,
I think it's a great space for entrepreneurs.
And we can help manage that process. And I think I want to see.
And you know what? I see the view. Anna agrees. She's got a thumbs up there. So she definitely agrees with your comments. What I'm seeing emerging actually from listening to all of your, your passionate talk. There is, High Street 3.0 is going to be a very exciting place indeed, because we're going to go. As you said, we're going to be lots of different local businesses, hopefully, some of them, not many of the same chains. Every high street will be unique and different potentially from the next one. So you might go to high street X for something and high street Y. So it might, bring in people from different areas, different locations. And also, I think the overall agenda, and I'm sure you definitely have this in your business plan, is the environment. We don't want to be, environment is key, I think, right? In the whole thing, eco, we've got a target. I think the UK has a target to be as a carbon neutral by 2050. That's going to be obviously written into the plan, and we need to drive that down. And again, if you remember back in the day, and I might be a lot older than you, but, you had unique different places on the high street. You had independents, whether that's a, mom and pop shop or a cake place or whatever that, it could be local artisans with just earrings, jewelry, whatever it might be, right? Local people with local uniqueness, bringing it to the business world. And we don't see very much of that right now. So I'd say high street's definitely not fit for purpose anymore. And I think in this challenging, but also very, very exciting times, there's a lot of opportunities for property investors and developers to get involved. And I'd say everyone listening into this, stay close to savethehighstreet.org and joinjoe.com. Reach out to Alex via his email. Look at if you want to invest in the fund. Is there a name for this fund, or is it just a...
It's not so much of a fund. I mean, we're positioning it more as a syndicate.
Syndicate, yeah. You want to get...
Yeah, but
syndicate.
It's the High Street 3.0 investment syndicate. So it's a bunch of investors coming together who kind of see this opportunity, who want to be close to this and want to be close to the transformation. Because like you said, Manny, and even in the title, the High Street's dead, but long live the High Street. And actually, we're Save the High Street.org, and we're really optimistic, even though it's been the hardest year. And there's been things that happened this year that nobody would have ever have foreseen. And it's really challenging for us as well, because we're so close to it and the team are close to it. We empathize the loss of jobs, the impact this is having short term on the market, and it's going to be painful. It's going to stay painful for a while. But on the other side of this future high street will be more dynamic, it'll be more collaborative, it'll be more successful. And like I said, it'll be more sustainable. A lot of the things that we want to see this future become are being forced to happen more quickly because of the pain. So the sense of optimism that we'll feel when you sort of connect with our team here is that, it's not like a long drawn out process anymore of transformation. It's being sped up. And the transformation of the high street is presenting all kinds of opportunities for both social impact and also commercial success for lots of different organizations.
Face it, Generation Z, it's all about the social impact, making a contribution. And, it's not just about take. I think we all need to be aware that we need to give back equally. And I'm totally, sold out to that idea myself, to be honest. And what I'd like to end with is this whole thing about the permitted development rights, which we haven't even touched yet, the whole Class E, where it's coming. There's a consultation out there. So firstly, would you like to give us a quick background on, if I quickly set the scene here, guys, Class E is permitted development rights to change from one use class to another, right? So a retail clothing shop, which was A1 and back in the day, could change into a dental surgery, or could change into a children's nursery, or could change into a takeaway restaurant.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, broadly. I mean, and this was something really important for us. When we talk about dynamic high streets, it's like, how can you have a dynamic high street if you've got to keep the same use the whole time, even though the world's changing all around you? And so Class E was a great addition. We were really pleased to see that. And we weren't calling it Class E, but we were banging a drum about this for a while. But also, in the broader sense here, what's happening next from here, if you want to sort of carry on, is that there's the consultation that is kicked off, which runs till the end of January, and then basically from July onwards, after July, the existing permitted development rights about the transfer from to residential in town centres is
from Class E. So from Class E, right now it's all about interchanging business use. But from July 2021, we're going to be using all of the Class E are going to be allowed to go into residential using permitted development with caveat.
So there's a process that we're in. We're in a consultation process now, and then after that, there's a process following the consultation before July, before things change. Yeah, so this isn't like an immediate thing here. There's nothing that's a given and a shoe-in at the moment. I've got to be clear around that. But one thing that you can sense and you can see, and you can as you check this out, and all the noises are saying the same thing, is there's going to be a loosening. Yeah, there's going to be more flexibility. Now, our point of view is we don't want to hollow out middle of high streets. We're really clear on that. We need really strong cores in the middle of high streets here. So we don't want certain things to happen. But what we do need to see is a lot more flexibility to build on top of and around high streets where it makes sense. And that's why we're accelerating our plans around sort of the national view of what the opportunities are on the high streets and the tools we're going to be providing to the landlords, so that we can be in the mix of all of this and making sure we're providing that support for the landlords. And in some cases, as I said, it's going to be, one outcome of this is going to be that some parts of high streets do become residential. And where that happens, we want to make sure it happens in the right place, in the right way. So you end up with a lot more local consumers and a lot more vibrancy happening in that local area, as well as good capital appreciation for the landlord.
I see High Street 3.0 as a place where you can not only just go for shopping, but you can live there, you can work there, you can play there. There'll be entertainment, there'll be experiential places
Yeah.
to go to, there'll be marketplaces. It just seems a really exciting new future High Street. And yes, there's going to be some pain before we get there. But I think if you guys want to stay involved with them, stay close to savethehighstreet.org, be connected. Whether you want to invest in the syndicate fund or not is an entirely your choice. But if you do, I think there'll be lots of benefits around it in terms of staying close to you. Assets are going to be disposed of. You're going to be, closer to those deals, hopefully. And this whole permitted development into Resi. And I know a lot of NIMBYs are saying, oh, what about you're going to create these cubby holes or what have you. But, we've got the new space standards. And we know that, minimum space for the flat would be 37 square meters. And I don't think property developers are greedy. And historically, there have been cases where there have been micro flats and, things like that. But I'd say from, being a SME developer myself, I'd say we definitely want to create that win-win rather than create that quality accommodation for people to go and live in. And again, high streets, we don't want them to die because it's crime. It's all the properties surrounding the high streets will fall in value inevitably if there is, the high street can't be revived. So I'd say we've touched on all different topics and aspects. Is there anything else you'd particularly like to mention before we sort of end this live stream?
No, I just want to say thank you to you as well, Manny. It's always a pleasure to come on. And if anybody wants to have a chat, as I said, particularly this week and in sort of build up to Christmas, I've actually kind of sort of really ring fence myself to have conversations with interesting new people around this all. There's quite a few people get in touch, set up a bit of a sort of group Q&A or something like that. But just drop me a line. I'm here to talk this week. So
so take the tip from Alex. Definitely get in touch with him via his email address, which is in the chat. I'd say I'm super excited about the new high street. And I really do appreciate you, Alex, in your busy period and in this, very challenging times, taking the time out and sharing this information with us. I want to get more closely involved with you guys, and I'm hoping that we can formulate a working relationship going forward. So looking to seeing loads more of you and hearing from you as well. And have a lovely Christmas. And I'd say, thanks very much once again for joining.
Thanks everyone for watching.